Redditors, what is the worst walk of shame you've had? How did it happen? The unemployment walk of shame, when you got your stuff together and you had to walk to the elevator. Was 7 or 8 at a chess tournament and was sick. Could either forfeit and not shit myself or win. I won. Did you win? Apostrophe. I did. Apostrophe. But what did it cost you? Apostrophe. Everything. One of like 3 times I blacked out drinking. Woke up in a nice bedroom with the sun shining in my eyes. Rolled over and had zero clue who the girl was. Quietly put on my clothes and tried to sneak down the stairs. Was obvious this was someone's parents' house. The hall was wall to wall family photos etc. I have no clue how to get out of the house. I take a turn and there is the whole family. Mom, dad, 2 sisters, and grandma and grandpa eating waffles. I mumble something about being sorry for interrupting their breakfast and sheepishly walk out the back door. I go outside and look for my car. I have zero clue where it is parked. I walk around the block for 10 minutes searching for it. I have no cell phone cause this is like 1998. And since this is obviously suburbia, there are no payphones in sight. Semicolon. I muster up every last bit of pride that I have to knock on their door and ask to speak to their daughter. I can't even conjure up her name at this point. One of the sisters answers the door, laughing her ass off. Her sister is upstairs getting yelled at by pretty much everyone but grandpa, who is still eating his waffles. I ask the sister to use the phone. Of course it is in the kitchen. I call my roommate and tell him to come pick me up at the intersection down the road. Whole time the grandfather is giving me the stinky and the sisters are like in tears laughing. Roommate picks me up 45 minutes later because I'm about as far across town as in physically possible. Brings me back to the club where my car was parked. At least my dumbass didn't drive there. Thanks for the gold, strangers. One time when I was around 13 I was at a Bible study at a relative's house and I was super gassy. I felt a big gut buster coming on and I decided the polite thing to do would be to excuse myself and go to the restroom and blow that foghorn. Well, I stood up and made it about 3 steps before I let out a quick pop and then proceeded to chainsaw fart my way across this quiet room with about 12 to 15 people reading the Bible. I stayed in the bathroom mortified until my aunt came and got me. After a wild night partying at my friend's dorm, I woke up at her place to the beanbag, carpet, and my clothing covered in vomit. I had to change clothes, gather everything in a trash bag, and carry it back to my dorm, which was a 15-minute walk away. Hungover. And did I mention that my friends stayed with me the entire time, laughing at me and pointing? Man, those were the days. Many years ago, I hooked up with a friend who lived downtown. I had parked my car on the street before going to the bar the night before. We had gotten pretty intoxicated that night, hence the hookup. We slept fairly late the next morning, both of us pretty hungover. I had entirely forgotten that there was an event that morning where they blocked off the streets, despite there being signs posted everywhere. So mid-morning I dodge my way through crowded streets to get back to where I parked my car, only to find it fenced in by temporary fences to block off the street for the kids' bike race that was about to start. My car was literally the only one left on the block. I asked a police officer when I could get it out and was told I'd have to wait until after the race. So there I sat on a bench on the sidewalk, visibly hungover, miserable, and surely ashamed, while a bunch of kids rode their bikes around downtown with their parents shooting me odd looks. Woke up on my prom date's parents' basement pool table, still wearing the top half of my tux, nothing below the waist. My date was asleep on the basement couch, jolted upright and bashed my head on the light fixture hanging above the pool table, cutting my forehead open. Could not find my underwear or socks. Walked home in snow and cold with a bleeding wound. Date's mom called my parents' house later that day, only to leave a message on the answering machine saying that she'd found my socks and underwear, and that she'd send them to school with my date. Nothing beats waking up in the house of a twin-tissime thing guy who supposedly had his own place, but then him expecting you to join him at the breakfast table with his stern-looking parents. I temporarily lived in a hotel in a smallish town, 7,000, for construction work for about 6 months. It was Halloween on a weeknight and lots of the construction folks went out partying. A woman friend and I made impromptu togas out of my bedsheets before heading out on the town. I crashed at her hotel that night, overslept a little, and walked back to my hotel along the commuter highway at 8 AM in only a toga. Went on a first date with a girl from an online dating app. Things went well, making out in a small pub. I accidentally set fire to my shirt on a candle. Wasted. We didn't care. Ended up staying at hers. Had to walk to work through central London the next morning in a half-burnt shirt until I could find a clothing shop and buy a t-shirt. My husband and I have been married for 23 years and have 4 sons in their late teens. For as long as we've been married, my husband goes and gets me a glass of ice water after sex. It wasn't a problem before, but now the boys stay up later than we do. He tries to avoid them when he goes for the water because he feels like they know. Our house is small. There's no avoiding them. He calls his water run the walk of shame. I don't know if that counts, but it makes me laugh. Maybe not the walk of shame you are asking about, but a few years ago I accidentally shat myself at the very crowded I Amsterdam sign. I had a very sudden bout gastro, with almost no warning. I had to do the walk of shame through the crowded streets of Amsterdam, in a shit-soaked pair of chambray short shorts. I was going to a fancy dress party where you wear anything but clothes. So bags, boxes, wrapping paper, anything but clothes. I had work the next day, so I thought I planned it out spectacularly. I took clothes for the next day into work because I knew I'd be staying at one of my many friends' houses where I could then get into work. Put the suit on and away with the day. I ended up getting with this girl who was staying in the Travelodge in the middle of town, right next to my workplace. Wow, how convenient and amazing this was. Anyway, skip to the morning, where I look to the floor and all that I have is a short pair of shorts and some trainers next to a pile of black bean bags. She was tiny, so there was no chance I was fitting in her clothes to get into work. I phoned my friend to tell him what had happened and asked if he could bring my clothes out. I told him I'd meet him down the side of the building by the bins. Clearly I was still shit-faced because I strolled out of the front of the Travelodge in my shorts, walked round the corner and sort of squatted behind the bins while I waited for my friend. This wasn't a dead end though. What I didn't realize was this was a shortcut from the train station through onto the main street, so there were hundreds of people walking through, many of who were working in the same building as me. Eventually he turned up. I threw my shirt and trousers on, went into work, cleaned up, and carried on with my day. I think more than half of the people on my floor probably saw me, and it was only awkward because no one would ever ask or say anything. Not many worse feelings than waking up in someone else's hostel room, sleeping 10, stark naked on a bottom bunk with no covers over you, then trying to find your underwear amongst about 5 people's piles of clothes. One of my best friends and I went to a club without the knowledge that a well-known actor from a famous Australian TV show was making an appearance. We didn't understand all the commotion in the club until we saw a poster advertising his appearance. We never heard of the bloke beforehand because both of us don't watch the show. Anyway, he came up to us and sparked a conversation, and I whisper to my friend, "If you don't go home with him, I will be very disappointed in you." She accepts his offer to go back to his hotel, but we don't know this bloke. He could be dangerous. I wanted my friend to enjoy her night, so I went over too just in case anything happened. So while my friend is having the time of her life in the bedroom, I passed out on the lounge. I'll admit I wasn't the best bodyguard. Hungover if I wake up in the early hours of the morning and Thea both still in the room. I call my other good friend and ask her to pick us up from So hotel in the city. My makeup is a mess. My hair is knotty and looks like sex hair. I'm still in my town outfit, which is tight AF, and I slip on the complimentary hotel slippers. They're better for my exit than my bulky heels, right? So I did absolutely nothing but sleep, and I walked through that whole hotel and out on the street. I could feel eyes on me with the obvious thoughts that I had a one night stand. If only they knew I was just trying to be a good friend. I, M32, was in a play during an incredibly hot summer in London when I was 22, and the director's daughter was 31 and in charge of the lighting. She was visiting for 6 months after finishing her BA in Australia, living at home with her father and his boyfriend in London. We hit it off straight away, and after the first lighting rehearsal we went for a drink and then went back to her father's house. But she was on edge the whole time about being caught. We couldn't go to mine as I had family staying, and we were both incredibly horny. So we went to a local park. We found a hidden place off the path in the dark and spent the rest of the night having al fresco sex, falling asleep wrapped around each other on a bed of our clothes around dawn. When we woke up in daylight, it was very clear we weren't half as well hidden from the path as we'd thought in the dark, with just some ferns on top of a slight rise between us and the path. So we quickly got dressed and holding hands walked off in search of breakfast. We were walking towards these two 14 over 15-year-old girls on the path, who were clearly coming back after walking their dog, and as they got closer to us, they both started blushing and laughing behind their hands. They'd quite clearly seen all of us on their way in on the path as we slept. I've never been so confused about whether to laugh or be ashamed or worry about being reported for something. And walking toward them was excruciating and felt like it lasted for hours. I put my arm around so she didn't feel alone and styled it out. But man, that was awkward. Was at a university residence partying. Went back to a girl's room. Ended up vomiting. Went to the laundry room at the end of the hall and threw my vomit-soaked wool sweater in the washer then dryer. Passed out sitting on the dryer and fell sideways banging my head on the shelf beside. Woke up with blood on my face and pants. A shrunked, vomit-stained sweater. Was unsure how to exit the building and walked back to my parents' house. Took an hour through a busy enough area. Thank God they just put me to bed without asking questions. Used to work at a leisure center where we hosted kids parties with a bouncy castle. We weren't licensed to have it outside, so we used to have it in one of the function rooms, and whilst setting it up we were asked to make sure no adults go on it because the ceiling was too low and they'd hit their heads. Anyway, one time my grandma hosted her birthday party there and all the kids are on the bouncy castle. I'd already told my aunts and uncles that they aren't allowed on. Then in a fit of what I can only assume is temporary insanity, the inner child in me takes over and I launch myself onto the bouncy castle, and in one bounce I fly up and crack my head open on the ceiling. I'm wearing a white shirt and blood is flowing from my open head wound onto it. All the kids are screaming and crying. My workmates have to come in and mop up all the blood whilst I'm paraded past them on my way to R&D. So yeah, no adults on the bouncy castle, guys. Please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.